Good morning. Welcome to Closing the Distance. I'm Jeff Myers, Senior Pastor here at Roswell Presbyterian Church, and it's a joy to have Kai Nilsen with us today, Lutheran pastor in St. Paul, Minnesota, the author of Renew Your Life, Discovering the Wellspring of God's Energy. And I look forward to exploring a little bit some of the stories behind this great book. It was so fun. You know, I read it many years ago, Kai, when we became friends. And it was fun to kind of look back through and see how I've kind of been nourished and flourished and impacted by your work and ministry. You've worked in the local church, but you've also been very active in your leadership with Renovaré, which focuses in on spiritual formation. So thanks for being here with us today.
Oh, love it. Yeah. And actually, Jeff, if you remember, I think your spirituality of dog walking made the book.
I think it did. It's the one time I've ever been quoted. Thank you, Kai. And thank you for being here. I hear you got 15 inches of snow there in St. Paul.
Oh gosh, and it's on top. I'm looking out at it right now. It's on top of what was about 3 feet already. So yeah, we all keep saying that this is the last one, but we know it's not. So
well, when you're ready to come visit Roswell, we've got a place for you to stay. So
love it. I'd love it.
Well, Kai, tell us a little bit about yourself and how God kind of brought you to St. Paul over the years.
I grew up in a Lutheran pastor's home, and there are 5 kids. 4 of us are Lutheran pastors. We took lots of different paths to get there, but we're there. And so my first call was in Madison, Wisconsin. I was in Columbus, Ohio for 26 years after that. And it's a huge discernment process. When you do something on discernment down the road, bring me back, because man, it was good, bad, and not, it's just a lot of work that went into that decision making. When's the right time to leave a place? When's the right time for you personally? When's the right time corporately? So, but finally we said, we had enough connections in the Twin Cities, because I went to seminary here. We went to college not too far from here, had some family in the area, and we thought, you know what, maybe it's time for a new adventure. And so that's what brought us here 3.5 years ago. And then, of course, as everyone knows, COVID hit. So it has been absolutely like 100% different than what we imagined. But, and I've been leaning into my spiritual disciplines, shall we say.
Yeah. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Well, in your fantastic book, Renew Your Life, you begin the book with a story about hitting rock bottom. And your story has always served as kind of like a warning sign to me, myself, to say, don't end up like Kai.
That's awesome.
What happened?
I think it was just, and many people have experienced this. You get to the point where you're just running hot. And you've got a lot of good things. I mean, in my life, they were all good things. I'd started my DMin program at Fuller. I'd moved into a lead role in my congregation at the time. I was very well known in the community, so they were asking me to be involved in things. I mean, they were all good things. And I didn't quite figure out how to say no to them and have a limit around them. And so we also had 4 kids. And so my wife and I were trying to pull all of that off. And candidly, I mean, the spiritual part of it was that I'd convinced myself that pretty much I could do this on my own. I'm a quick thinker. I keep myself in decent shape. I should be able to keep doing this. And I ran to the point where the opening story is just sitting in a coffee shop with a good friend of mine, and he's telling me the story, and I look at him, and I just literally had one of those little balloon moments while he's talking, saying, I don't care. I don't care what you're telling me. I've heard this story before. Why do I have to sit here and listen to this again? So I prided myself on being a compassionate person, right? And living with people in these situations. And I thought, I don't have the capacity to do this and to live into anyone else's story right now. And so I called, and this is actually, you'll appreciate this too, I think. I called my mom and dad. My dad's been a pastor at that point for 35 years. My mom's a writer and a very deep thinker. And so I'm just, Mom, Dad, I need something. I figured they could provide me with an answer. And my dad's response was, well, I think you're just going to have to muddle through this. I was like, come on. Literally, I said, Dad, put Mom on the phone. She'll tell me she loves me. But I knew that there was a shift. I read it in my body. I read it in my interest for other people. And something had, I'm sure it wasn't as dramatic as one moment, and it had just been coming on for a long time. But that was a pivotal moment for me where I just can't sustain this anymore. And so I had to start rethinking, who I was going to be and how I was going to kind of live into that space where I was. So.
And what kind of practical changes did you make in terms of your spiritual practices, spirituality after that?
I think honestly, the first one, Jeff, was I began to just think differently about spirituality in general. So John Ortberg had a fascinating little quote that said something like, God's not interested in an abstract thing called your spiritual life. God's interested in your life.
Oh.
And I thought, and how often do we sort of make a separation between those two things?
Yep.
And so I do my spiritual things over here. I've got my quiet time. I go to worship. I serve somewhere. And that's that kind of my spiritual stuff I offer to God. And then I live over here. And it's wait a second, you can't live disintegrated like that. I mean, it's literally disintegrated. And so how do I start integrating all of my life and say all of it is a gift, A, that I've received, and B, that I can offer back to God, which meant for me that normal things that I would not have included in my spiritual life and disciplines, maybe I had to just start to rethink. I'm a person who worked out, consistently, and I kept that discipline at least going through. But instead of thinking about that as something other than my spiritual life, I started thinking about it more consciously when I'm there as, if my body's not in decent shape, I can't do what God's asking me to do. So that's part of the work that God's been asking me to do, rather than to think of it as an add-on, to my life. I started thinking about conversations that I had, and those would be part of the spiritual life rather than separate. I did have to, I'm an extrovert by nature. And so I kind of felt like I could live my spiritual life just in relationship with people, bouncing ideas off back and forth. And the thing that I probably learned the most was my need for quiet and to remove myself from the noise of the world, and even good conversation, to remove myself enough to actually be able to listen to my own voice and the voice of God versus voices that are around. I was sort of a sucker for a new insight,
Right.
And but then I was just sort of following, that new insight and not making it sort of, is this kind of an important thing for me, or is actually God asking me to think on this a little bit, or am I just kind of going, hey, this sounds like a cool pursuit? So that's when, for me, the internal life became way more important and necessary to design into my life versus if it happens, it happens, which is kind of where I was with any more quiet prayer prior to that.
Wow. Now, was this like, what did it look like practically? Was it in the morning? Was it in the evening? Was it in your study, living room? Did you sit, kneel?
No, great questions. Well, it certainly developed.
Okay.
The first thing, at the time, my house was chaos. I mean, 4 kids, a dog.
And I've met some of your kids. I know they're a handful.
It couldn't be there for me. So, I have the gift actually of being a part of a job in an office where I can actually design something in my office. So I actually developed a little space in my office with not an officey chair, with a comfortable chair with, devotional books next to me. I'd light a candle there. I mean, I just started developing kind of layers of things that would get me into that space, because I knew that I knew if I didn't say when I was going to do it, I probably wouldn't do it. If I waited till the right time, I probably wouldn't do it. And so like a lot of other things, I mean, they talk about them as spiritual disciplines because that's what they are. Like you've got to sort of, and that sounds like a negative word. That's one transition for me too that's been helpful. Like discipline's not a negative word, you know. It can be if it's harsh and abusive, certainly, but it's just ordering your life in a certain way that you're saying what's important and what do you need to be able to be open to receive the Spirit of God. And so that's when it began to do. Okay, I've just got to put this, like I started, you know, the old Stephen Covey system from way back when, right? You know, you started putting things on calendars at certain time, and I became not afraid of putting in, you know, an appointment with myself, you know, and I'd name it different things, and people would say, "Hey, can we meet at this time every day?" And I said, "Well, no, actually, I can't meet until half an hour later or something." You know, so it had to become that important for me to be able to design it into my life, or else it wasn't going to have any effect over time.
Right. And I love that what you said about how it developed and it changed over time. Because I think a lot of us, we are given to like, if I find the correct way, I'm going to unlock the secrets of the universe. If I just, if it's like as if it's like wizardry or like some magic.
Yeah. You know, I had a friend of mine who was a member of my previous congregation who I met with one time, and he was kind of trying to tell me how spiritual he was. And he said, "Man, and I'm listening to podcasts, you know, and I listen to other people's sermons during the week, and I do this." I mean, he's like listing all of these things. And I said, I finally stopped him because it hit me. I said, it actually sounds like you're like, I've heard the same language in addicts, right? Nothing is satisfying to them. So they have to go on and try to find that next hit of something. And I think they can become that way in our, we don't trust anything to develop over time and deeply. And so if we do something for a short period of time and go, "Oh, that doesn't work." Like we say that, I use that language a lot, or other people do. Doesn't work for me. Right. But I think it's one of the big things about the spiritual life is putting in the framework of your whole life and making just thinking through a long arc. And nothing has to be the same all the time forever, but we do have to sort of make a commitment to say, let's live into this for a certain period of time before I make a decision about whether it's, quote, working for me or not.
Right.
Because I do think that there are times when something, you know, I've had times when I just cannot do my verbal prayer lists, right? I mean, whatever's going on in my life, they seem so mundane. I'm thinking, God knows this anyway. What's the point? You know? But there'll be a point when I re-engage that, you know, and it feels more healthy and more alive, and I'm ready for it again. So you have to be willing to make adaptation as needed, but I think you also have to be willing to think how does this play out in the long term? And what am I willing to do to say, I just need to put myself in a place where the Spirit of God can work into my life. That's all these exercises are. They're not magic. They're not the be all and end all. I mean, if someone says, "Hey, I pray 60 minutes every day," I go, "Cool. Why are you still a jerk?" You know, you know, because it's not just the exercise. We're not ticking off boxes for God.
Right.
So, I think for me, it's just saying, okay, if there's something in my life that I need to work toward, what's going to be a pathway for me to make connection with that? And that's what I think the spiritual disciplines are all about. I'll add one more thing, and then I'd like to hear from you too, because I think you're in a context that's similar to mine. I think that there are spiritual exercises that sort of become more important based on people and or communities that you're part of.
Okay.
And so I think of, especially I've worked in two kind of suburban communities my last two calls, and here are the things that have seemed to be most formative in those experiences. One is having people serve, right? Because what does serving do? Serving as a spiritual discipline takes you outside of yourself, right? So there's a point where you say, This is not just for me anymore. So serving is a critical piece because it moves people out of themselves. Giving, in relatively wealthy communities, I mean, if that has a hold on people's lives, and if that piece can be freed from them, I think so much more gets that generosity just spills over into so many other things. So I think serving, giving, and then for me, and I think it's more and more the case, that whole sense of quiet, centering prayer, being away, is critical because there's just too much noise in the world, and there's too much chaos that happens in people's lives every single day. And so if we're going to hear it, just like basic, like you can't hear anything if there's too much noise. You sit in a crowded restaurant, you can barely hear the person next to you. Right. If all that's going on in your head while you're trying to listen to God, you can't hear anything,
Yeah. Oh, so, totally. I totally get that. And what did David Foster Wallace, the great nonfiction writer, called it? Total noise, capital T, capital N, total noise.
I believe it.
And it's all the beeps and buzzings and things that overwhelm us. And yesterday we talked about meditation and the spiritual practice of meditation. And quieting everything down, finding silence, quieting our minds down. And that's hard work. One woman goes, well, I can't do that. She goes, I could barely pay attention for 10 seconds. And I think that's really scary.
Yeah.
And so you brought up the word discipline. I like the word discipline with that positive connotation. I think some people refer to spiritual practices. Yeah. And I always think of like the athlete, right? Like if I love basketball. Well, why am I not a better basketball player? Well, how much time are you working on your jump shot?
Exactly.
Are you lifting weights? So, right. It's like, why can't I have a guitar solo like Jimi Hendrix? Right? How much have you practiced?
Yeah.
How much and I think some of us act like the spiritual life is magic, or or we don't need to attend to it. And I think these disciplines help us attend to it and to open ourselves up so that we can see God and hear God at work.
Yeah. Because really that's I love that, Jeff. That's all you're doing is put yourself in a place with these spiritual exercises, practices, disciplines, whatever you want to call them, where the Spirit of God can speak more deeply into your life. That's all you're doing. You're just kind of putting yourself in that place. And I have a little phrase that I developed for myself over the years that just says simply this: what we focus on and do is what we become.
Okay.
So if you think about what you focus on, it means what are the thoughts, what are the inputs and communication that you have throughout the day? What do you spend your time thinking about? What are you motivated by? So what you focus on, but then also what you do. Because I think once you have to sort of wrap your body up into it too.
Yep.
And then it becomes repetitive, and just like your athlete connection, you don't develop anything that's going to be of value over time that you do sporadically. Right. And so it just has to be kind of a consistent immersion over time. And so what you focus your mind on, and the beauty of that is that you have choice, right? I mean, you can choose what you want to, if I wanted to read a certain thing, or if I wanted to watch a certain thing, or if I want, you have choice, not all parts of your day, depending on whether you're working or at home or whatever it is. But for a good amount of us, we have a choice about what we can do with portions of our day to say what's going to be the input that we receive. And then what you also have a choice about what you do. And so, so ultimately that shapes you, and that's what you become over time.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, okay. So we're focusing in on meditation. Oh, I'm interested. Okay.
Cool.
So Pastor Kai, okay. What kind of advice would you give a novice, somebody who's never meditated, never done centering prayer, they're new to the game, and they're interested, they're curious? What kind of advice would you give really practically about beginning a practice like that?
Yeah. I would say allow yourself a lot of grace at the beginning, because it won't feel natural. Probably it won't be uh, in your mind. You won't think it's productive time for a while. And so just to kind of allow yourself the grace of that, like, and give up like outcomes or expertise. Like, I'm not developing competence in this,
Yep.
I'm just doing it. I'm just giving it God a chance to speak into this. So I think that's a critical piece, to allow yourself the grace of that. Second, again, as I said earlier, design something or part of your day to allow for you to start working with it. Start small. Actually, don't think you're going to be a wizard within, I'm going to be doing 30 minutes of deep meditation within a week. You're not. You just won't. So just relieve yourself of that responsibility. And also, I think there's something about place that's critical. So if there is any way to, people's circumstances are very different in regard to this, where you can design a place where, like, I'm in my downstairs office right now, and I just happen to look past my computer screen, and there's a cardinal out there, and it's just fantastically beautiful, right?
Yep.
And so this is a place where I get to notice more, because there's not a lot of other chaos and noise going on. So, and that's what you're doing. You're just trying to notice more about what's happening in the world and what God might be saying to you. So those three things. So give yourself some grace, find yourself a time, find yourself a place, start slow.
Mm-hmm.
For me, probably the easiest entree into it, rather than just thinking about being quiet, because I couldn't stop whatever else was happening in my mind for a long time, was to do a thing that, and you had mentioned it sometime down the road, what we call the breath prayer. And that's sort of a consistent discipline that a lot of people use. But what that does for me is it gives me something to focus on, because then again, when you focus on something, then that's it. It's less likely that other things would then, like, if I just said, let's be quiet for now, I mean, everything that happened 10 minutes ago is coming back into your mind.
Yeah.
Everything you should be doing is coming into your mind. Everything you want to be doing tonight is coming into your mind. But at least with a breath prayer or activities like that, it does allow you some sense of focus. How are you going to focus in on that? For me, the breath prayer, it's the one I started to do early on when I started meeting with the spiritual director, and they just said, all right, you got to focus in on something. And it's a very easy process. Would it be okay if I just like showed you what I do?
Yeah.
I mean, I won't spend a lot of time with it, but just to kind of tell you all you do is simply kind of connect a few words with your breath. And so as you breathe in, you just say to yourself, breath of God. And so breath of God reminds you of the God who created the universe, the God who breathed life into the first human beings, the Jesus after the resurrection who breathed life into his frightened disciples in that upper room. Yep. Life comes at you through your breath, right? And so you breathe in, you say breath of God, and then you can attach anything else to that you might be working on. So where the title of my book came is that one of the things I would do is I would often say, breath of God, renew my life. So you exhale and you attach a few more words to it. And then you just do it for as many times as you can. Breath of God, renew my life. Breath of God, renew my life. Breath of God, renew my life. Wow. And you just kind of, it starts to just slow you down, and I would just give yourself a couple of minutes right away, expand it out. If it's, could be something, maybe you're dealing with not knowing what to do in a relationship, so breath of God, help me love. Breath of God, help me love. Breath of God, forgive my sins. Whatever you want to attach to it in regard to what you might need at a given time, there's a way to do that. So that was a great starter for me in regard to becoming more centered and quiet. And yeah.
See, it's funny you bring up the breath or breathing prayer. And I remember, golly, I can't remember if this was in Houston or this was up in the mountains, like North Carolina, that you were leading one of those workshops and you had us just do a breathing prayer practice all together.
Yeah.
And it was a profound experience to like just be totally quiet and focus on your breath, and everybody's doing that together. That was a really profound spiritual experience for me.
Yeah. I think it's, again, it's an open door into a part of the deeper life. And I think with people, anyone who kind of struggles with a mind that's so confused or so filled or feels so chaotic with so many demands, that's probably like one of the key disciplines to at least begin to start doing it, because what you're doing is saying, hey, I just need to create some space here. Yeah.
I love it. Well, we're going to be wrapping up here in a sec, but I want to
Wonderful.
ask you, you're a man, I mean, you mentioned you have 4 kids, and one of the things I'm thinking about a lot is just like, what is the world that our kids are growing up in, that we're handing off to them? And like, what kind of challenges do you see, and what opportunities maybe we have? And how can the church foster and take care of our young people?
Yeah. Wow, that's a huge question, isn't it? Well, a couple of things. One, gosh, I just read a report recently on the mental and emotional state of teenage girls, and it is frightening. Yeah. It's absolutely frightening. Middle school, high school, just devastating. And it so much has to do with their image of themselves. So much has to do with the pressure that they feel to be something that they're not. I think, gosh, it's great to throw out a bogeyman, social media, but I think that the underside of the flip side of that from a church perspective is just what's going to be the consistent message that we tell our kids. What's just going to be the thing that they will not leave our place until they've heard this at least, or until they've experienced this at least one time. We just had a girl who was brought into a place for suicidal ideation this last week, actually. And the only small thing that provided anyone any comfort was that she loved to be at church. Like that was, because for her, unfortunately, it was like the only place where she got this message that no matter who you are, no matter what's happening in your life, you are loved. So I think that's a huge thing in our world. I think our kids can be way more idealistic, and they want the world to change than we've sort of allowed them to, because we've been, in my tradition too, in the Lutheran tradition, we've been so wrapped up in getting them to believe the right things about what it means to be a Lutheran. And that's just becoming less and less important. But they do see how destructive the world can be to them and to their friends, especially if their friends are of a different ethnicity, or if they're of a different orientation or creed or something. That's their friends. They're seeing a world and experiencing a world that's far bigger than the churches that I've served, that they've grown up in. And they don't want their church community to somehow feel like it's in opposition to what they're experiencing in the world out there. So that's a big challenge for us, as leaders of faith communities. But it's I've got a small perspective, right? Think about it. I'm a white guy in Columbus, Ohio, and St. Paul, Minnesota, for my raising my kids' times. But it's really important. I think the image I keep saying to my communities now, that there's an expansive God that just goes beyond what we can imagine. There's an expansive God that goes beyond what we have imagined. So let's connect ourselves to that, not be hyper judgmental about which creating the right pathway for them to be on, because there's God's working in ways well beyond what we can imagine, I think, at this point. And
Wow.
so,
Well,
just a few things. I don't know. It's hard. It's hard, man. And you got 2 young kids.
that's your next book, man. That's your next way to go.
No, I'm thinking about you with your 2 young kids, man. It's yeah, bless you.
We're taking it day by day, brother.
Yeah, you and Courtney, it's big work. It's a huge work
indeed.
and very
It's been
important.
awesome talking to you. So we focus on meditation this week. Next week, we're going to look at the theme of prayer. Obviously, centering prayer and meditation is kind of a subset of prayer. But we're going to talk to the theologian Kyle Strobel from Biola,
Awesome.
Howard School of Theology. Are there any questions you think we should ask him?
Most people in my congregation want him to know. The simple question is, how does prayer work?
How does
I mean, because they want to be able to do something, right? And they've maybe been conditioned or trained to do it in whatever level, but they're like, what does that mean then if the very stuff that I pray for never seems to materialize? And does that mean God is not there? Does it mean I'm not there? It mean, what does that all that mean? So yeah.
Well, Kyle's a smart guy.
And then post it, because I want to hear his response.
Oh, we're definitely going to post it. Well, Kai, this has been an awesome time. Thank you for closing the distance with us. It's so good to see your face, hear your voice. For those who are listening, remember you can tune in every Monday on Facebook Live at noon. We'll be having these conversations all through Lent, and then we'll be posting the audio on our podcast feed. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Kai, take care. We'll see you soon, brother.
Awesome. Doing good work, Jeff.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.